a shovel in hand, she roams the universe, exploring every land, no map, no reverse. Oh, digger 420, curious Canuck, answers on your mind, never getting stuck. Running waves of stars through the cosmic sea, finding who we are in the galaxy. She's got questions to ask and a fire that won't die, unraveling each task under the sky. Oh, digger 420, curious Canuck, answers on your mind, never getting stuck. Running waves of stars through the cosmic sea, finding who we are in the galaxy. She's got questions to ask and a fire that won't die, unraveling each task under the sky. Oh, digger 420, curious Canuck, answers on your mind, never getting stuck.
Because, you know. Morning. How's everyone? Almost afternoon. Probably afternoon for most of you. How are you doing? Hey, it's Thursday morning. It's reading time. We're going to finish part 1 today of The Man Who Mistook His Wife for a Hat. That'll be fun. Not that I haven't enjoyed this already. I've enjoyed it absolutely. This has been quite interesting. I've had to really wrap my head around the idea of being one of these people in these situations. That being said, it'll be nice to start the second section to get off of losses. I think it's time. That's Sweets over there in the rocking chair. If you don't already know, she's the stripy one with the polka dot belly. She's been uber duper lovey, like really needs the attention for the past probably half an hour or so. So don't mind her. Hopefully she'll settle and sleep there. She might come on up over here. Oh, hey, Sweets. Hey. Or are you going to ignore me now? Yeah, hopefully she'll ignore me and allow me to do the reading and stuff. Anyways, I had some last minute technical difficulties as per usual, because, you know, why the heck not? So how is everyone's morning going so far today? Are we all doing good? Wakey. Oh, now there we go. Got myself talking in my ear. There we go. And now I can do that. Yay. Now I can see you guys too. Oh, unless I double click by accident. Oh, for Pete's sakes. It's been that kind of a day all week, I tell you. It's been just anything that can make things a little bit more difficult, it'll do. Just cause. Anyways, here we are. I think I've got everyone settled in the right spot. Sweet. Until I do that. So, good morning. How is everyone? As you can tell, I'm having a day, and I've been having it all week. Not a horrible time, just everything's a little bit more difficult. Not enough to get like really annoyed, but just enough to be, just a little put off every step of the way. Anyways, where was I? We're almost done losses. We will finish that one today. Next section, part 2, is excesses, which should be fun because, excess can be very fun. I guess there's 4 parts. The third part is transports. And part 4 is world of the simple, which sounds interesting. But for today, we are finishing part 1, losses. We're starting with chapter 8. And away we go. There's no one in chat yet, so I'll just start reading. Chapter 8, Eyes Right. Mrs. S., an intelligent woman in her 60s, has suffered a massive stroke, affecting the deeper and back portions of her right cerebral hemisphere. She has perfectly preserved intelligence and humor. She sometimes complains to the nurses that they have not put dessert or coffee on her tray. When they say, "But Mrs. S., it's right there on the left," she seems not to understand what they say and does not look to the left. If her head is gently turned so that the dessert comes into sight, in the preserved right half of her visual field, she says, "Oh, there it is. It wasn't there before." She has totally lost the idea of left with regard to both the world and her own body. Sometimes she complains that her portions are too small, but this is because she only eats the right half of the plate. It does not occur to her that she has a left half as well. Sometimes she will put on lipstick and make up the right half of her face, leaving the left half completely neglected. It's almost impossible to treat these things because her attention cannot be drawn to them. Hemin attention, see Battersby, 1956. And she has no conception that they are wrong. She knows it intellectually and can understand and laugh, but it is impossible for her to know it directly. Knowing it intellectually, knowing it inferentially, she has worked out strategies for dealing with her imperception. She cannot look left directly, and she cannot turn left. So what she does is to turn right, and right through a circle. Thus she requested and was given a rotating wheelchair. And now if she cannot find something which she knows should be there, she swivels to the right through a circle until it comes into view. She finds this significantly successful if she cannot find her coffee or dessert. If her portions seem too small, she will swivel to the right, keeping her eyes to the right, until the previously missed half now comes into view. She will eat this, or rather half of this, and feel less hungry than before. But if she's still hungry, or she thinks on the matter, and realizes that she may have perceived only half of the missing half, she will make a second rotation until the remaining quarter comes into view, and in turn, bisect this yet again. This usually suffices. After all, she has now eaten 7/8 of the portion. Sorry. There, nice cold water. Hopefully that'll work a little better. This usually suffices. After all, make sure I'm on. After all, she has now eaten 7/8 of the portion. But she may, if she is feeling particularly hungry or obsessive, make a third turn and secure another 16th of her portion, leaving, of course, the remaining 16th, the left 16th, on her plate. It's absurd, she says. I feel like Zeno's arrow. I never get there. It may look funny, but under the circumstances, what else can I do? It would seem far simpler for her to rotate the plate than rotate herself. She agrees and has tried this, or at least tried to try it. But it is oddly difficult and it does not come naturally, whereas whizzing around in her chair does, because her looking, her attention, her spontaneous movements and impulses are all now exclusively and instinctively to the right. Especially distressing to her was the derision which greeted her when she appeared only half made up, the left side of her face absurdly void of lipstick and rouge. I look in the mirror, she said, and do all I see. Would it be possible, we wondered, for her to have a mirror such that she would see the left side of her face on the right? See the left side of her face on the right. That is, as someone else facing her would see her. We tried a video system with a camera and monitor facing her, and the results were startling and bizarre. For now, using the video screen as mirror, she did see the left side of her face to her right, an experience confounding even to a normal person. I'll bet. As anyone knows who has tried to shave using a video screen, and doubly confounding, uncanny for her, because the left side of her face and body, which she now saw, had no feeling, no existence for her, in consequence of her stroke. Take it away, she cried, in distress and bewilderment, so we did not explore the matter further. This is a pity because, as R.L. Gregory also wonders, there might be much promise in such forms of video feedback for such patients with hemi-inattention and left hemifield extinction. The matter is so physically and indeed metaphysically confusing that only experiment can decide. Well, nowadays we've got mirroring. I can flip my camera so it's mirrored, so it actually, well, I think I've got it mirrored. So when I'm pointing this way, it actually looks to me like I'm pointing the right way. But I could have it unmirrored, and that would actually give them or her the view that she needs. She still wouldn't be able to feel anything, but I think that would correct what is messing her up right now. So that's kind of cool. Postscript: computers and computer games, not available until 1976 when I saw Mrs. S, may also be invaluable to patients with unilateral neglect in monitoring the missing half, or teaching them to do this themselves. I have recently, as of 1986, made a short film of this. I could not make reference in the original edition of this book to a very important book which came out almost simultaneously, Principles of Behavioral Neurology, edited by M. Marcel Mesulam. I cannot forbear quoting Mesulam's eloquent formulation of neglect. When the neglect is severe, the patient may behave almost as if one half of the universe has abruptly ceased to exist in any meaningful form. Patients with unilateral neglect behave not only as if nothing were actually happening in the left hemisphere, but also as if nothing of any importance could be expected to occur there. So not only is there nothing, that's interesting, that it's not only are they not seeing it, they're not even thinking that they should be seeing it, expecting to see it. You know, they just completely, it does no longer exist in thought or, that's pretty cool. Let me just move this. Okay, perfect. And we're already, chapter 9. This is going to be a quick reading one. Anyways, you guys can let me know when we finish this one if you want to start the next part 2 today or not. So chapter 9, the President's Speech. What was going on? A roar of laughter from the aphasia ward just as the President's speech was coming on, and they had all been so eager to hear the President speaking. There he was, the old charmer, the actor, with his practiced rhetoric, his histrionisms, his emotional appeal, and all the patients were convulsed with laughter. Well, not all. Some looked bewildered, some looked outraged, one or two looked apprehensive, but most looked unamused. The president was, as always, moving, but he was moving them, apparently, mainly to laughter. What could they be thinking? Were they failing to understand him? Or did they, perhaps, understand him all too well? It was often said of these patients who through intelligent who, it was often said of these patients who, though intelligent, had the severest receptive or global aphasia, rendering them incapable of understanding words as such, that they nonetheless understood most of what was said to them. Their friends, their relatives, the nurses who knew them well, could hardly believe sometimes that they were aphasic. This was because, when addressed naturally, they grasped some or most of the meaning, and one does speak naturally. Thus, to demonstrate their aphasia, one had to go to extraordinary lengths, as a neurologist, so to speak and behave unnaturally, to remove all the extraverbal cues, the tone of voice, purpose, to pick up falsehood or malice or equivocal intentions, to tell us who can be trusted, who is integral, who makes sense, when we, so susceptible to words, cannot trust our own instincts. And what dogs can do here, aphasiacs do too, and at a human and immeasurably superior level. One can lie with the mouth, Nietzsche writes, but with the accompanying grimace, one nevertheless tells the truth. To such a grimace, to any falsity or impropriety in bodily appearance or posture, aphasiacs are preternaturally sensitive. If they cannot see one, and this is especially true of our blind aphasiacs, they have an infallible ear for every vocal nuance, the tone, the rhythm, the cadences, the music, the subtlest modulations, inflections, intonations, which can give or remove verisimilitude to or from a man's voice. In this, then, lies their power of understanding without words what is authentic or inauthentic. Thus it was the grimaces, the histrionisms, the false gestures, and, above all, the false tones and cadences of the voice, which rang false for these wordless but immensely sensitive patients. It was to these, for them, the most glaring, even grotesque incongruities and improprieties that my aphasic patients responded, undeceived and undeceivable by words. And this is why they laughed at the president's speech. If one cannot lie to an aphasiac, in view of his special sensitivity to expression and tone, how is it, we might ask, with patients, if there are such, who lack any sense of expression and tone, while preserving unchanged their comprehension for words? Patients of an exactly opposite kind. We have a number of such patients also on the aphasia ward, although technically they do not have aphasia, but instead a form of agnostia, in particular a so-called tonal agnostia. For such patients, typically, the expressive qualities of voices disappear. Their tone, their timbre, their feeling, their entire character, while words and grammatical constructions are perfectly understood. Such tonal agnostias, or aprosodias, episodias, are associated with disorders of the right temporal lobe of the brain, whereas the aphasias go with disorders on the left temporal lobe. Among the patients with tonal agnostia on our aphasia ward, who also listened to the president's speech, was Emily D., with a glioma in her right temporal lobe. A former English teacher and poetess of some repute, with an exceptional feeling for language and strong powers of analysis and expression, Emily D. was able to articulate the opposite situation, how the president's speech sounded to someone with tonal agnostia. Emily D. could no longer tell if a voice was angry, cheerful, sad, whatever. Since voices now lacked expression, she had to look at people's faces, their postures and movements when they talked, and found herself doing so with care and intensity she had never shown before. But this, it so happened, was also limited because she had a malignant glaucoma and was rapidly losing her sight too. What she then found she had to do was to pay extreme attention to the exactness of words and word use, and to insist that those around her did just the same. She could less and less follow loose speech or slang, speech of an elusive or emotional kind, and more required of her interlocutors that they speak prose, proper words in proper places. Prose, she found, might compensate in some degree for lack of perceived tone or feeling. In this way, she was able to preserve, even enhance, the use of expressive speech, in which the meaning was wholly given by apt choice and reference of words, despite being more and more lost with evocative speech, where meaning is wholly given in the use and sense of tone. Emily D. also listened, stony-faced, to the president's speech, bringing it to a strange mixture of enhanced and defective perceptions, precisely the opposite mixture to those of our aphasiacs. It did not move her. No speech now moved her. And all that was evocative, genuine, or false completely passed her by. Deprived of emotional reaction, was she then, like the rest of us, transported or taken in? By no means. He is not cogent, she said. He does not speak good prose. His word use is improper. Either he is brain damaged, or he has something to conceal. Thus, the president's speech did not work for Emily D. either, due to her enhanced sense of formal language use, propriety and prose, any more than it did for our aphasiacs with their word deafness but enhanced sense of tone. Here then was the paradox of the president's speech. We normals, aided doubtless by our wish to be fooled, were indeed well and truly fooled. Populus vult decepti, ergo deceptiatur. And so cunningly was deceptive word use combined with deceptive tone, that only the brain damaged remained intact and undeceived. There you go. That's it. That was 23 minutes. Now, I'm wondering, from my perspective, there's no one in chat, and there's only 3 people watching. Let me see here. Can I do this? If there's anyone watching, could they please write something in chat so I know you're there? I am wondering if I should go on to part 2. If anyone is wanting me to continue on now, or if you would like to just start again next week. All right. Oh, well, at least the YouTube chat finally came up for me. I've been having issues with YouTube last few days. It takes forever for the live chat to actually open for me. Like forever. But yeah, so it looks like there's 5 of you roughly, and none of you typing in chat. So I'm going to assume that means that you're okay if I just stop it here for the day. I'm still not quite feeling up to it from yesterday. So unless there's like a flurry of ones in the chats to tell me to keep going, I will call it quits for today, and I will see you on Saturday game night. Where am I going? To that one there. All right. Be well, everyone. Oh, Linda's here, having trouble texting. Okay. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what's going on, but YouTube in particular has been really funny the last couple of days. And see, my PC is kind of okay. There we go. Looks like my camera's not stuttering anymore. So there's that. You're having trouble texting. Okay. Well, would you like me to continue on, Linda, and start part 2? Well, apparently now I've got even more people watching, but no one in chat. So tell you what, Linda's here and she's listening. She's just having trouble writing. So we've only been going 27 minutes. Let's go a little longer, eh? For you guys who are watching, just not chatting. So we'll do part 2. Yeah, Linda says sure. Okay. It does seem like really quick for a reading stream. I'd like to average hour and a half to 2 hours. I know Behold a Pale Horse there was a couple chapters that were taking near 4 hours to read the one chapter. So this is going a heck of a lot quicker. All right, well then we'll start part 2. And this is called Excesses. So this will be a little bit more entertaining, I would think. Well, not entertaining. The last was entertaining. Interesting, I guess. So excesses, introduction. Deficit. We have said, sorry. Deficit, we have said, is neurology's favorite word. Its only word, indeed, for any disturbance of function. Either the function, like a capacitor or fuse, is normal, or it is defective or faulty. What other possibility is there for a mechanistic neurology, which is essentially a system of capacities and connections? What then of the opposite, an excess or superabundance of function? Neurology has no word for this because it has no concept. A function or functional system works or it does not. These are the only possibilities it allows. Thus, a disease which is ebullient or productive in character challenges the basic mechanistic concepts of neurology. And this is doubtless one reason why such disorders, common and important and intriguing as they are, have never received the attention they deserve. They receive it in psychiatry, where one speaks of excited and productive disorders, extravagances of fancy, of impulse, of mania. And they receive it in anatomy and pathology, where one speaks of hypertrophies, monstrosities, of teratoma. But physiology has no equivalent for this, no equivalent of monstrosities or manias. And this alone suggests that our basic concept or vision of the nervous system, as a sort of machine or computer is radically inadequate and needs to be supplemented by concepts more dynamic and more alive. This radical inadequacy may not be apparent when we consider only loss, but the privation of functions we considered in Part 1. But it becomes immediately obvious if we consider their excesses, not amnesia, but hypermnesia, not agnosia, but hypernosia, and all other hypers we can imagine. Classical Jacksonian neurology never considers such disorders of excess, that is, primary superabundances or burgeonings of functions, as opposed to so-called releases. Hewlings Jackson himself, it is true, did speak of hyperphysiological and superpositive states. But here, we might say he is letting himself go, being playful, or simply just being faithful to his clinical experience, though at odds with his own mechanical concepts of function. Such contradictions were characteristic of his genius, the chasm between his naturalism and his rigid formalism. We have come to almost to the present day to find a neurologist who even considers an excess. Thus, Luria's two clinical biographies are nicely balanced. The Man with the Shattered World is about loss. The Mind of a Mnemonist about excess. I find the latter by far the more interesting and original of the two, for it is, in effect, an exploration of imagination and memory, and no such exploration is possible to classical neurology. In Awakenings, there was an internal balance, so to speak, between the terrible privations seen before L-Dopa, akinesia, abulia, adenamia, adenemia, inertia, etc., and the almost equally terrible excesses of L-Dopa, hyperkinesia, hyperbulia, hyperdynamia, etc. And in this we see the emergence of a new sort of term, of terms and concepts other than those of function. Impulse, will, dynamism, energy, terms essentially kinetic and dynamic, whereas those of classical neurology are essentially static. And in the mind of a mnemonist, we see dynamisms of much higher order at work. The thrust of an ever-burgeoning and almost uncontrollable association in imagery, a monstrous growth of thinking, a sort of teratoma of the mind, which the mnemonist himself calls an it. But the word it, or automatism, is also too mechanical. Burgeoning conveys better the disquietingly alive quality of the process. We see in the mnemonist, or in my own over-energized, galvanized patients on L-Dopa, a sort of animation gone extravagant, monstrous, or mad. Not merely an excess, but an organic proliferation, a generation, not just imbalance, a disorder of function, but a disorder of generation. We might imagine, from a case of an amnesia or agnosia, that there is merely a function or competence impaired. But we see from patients with hypernesias and hypernosias that nemes and gnosis are inherently active and generative at all times, inherently and potentially, monstrously as well. Thus, we are forced to move from a neurology of function to a neurology of action, of life. This crucial step is forced upon us by the diseases of excess, and without it, we cannot begin to explore the life of the mind. Traditional neurology, by its mechanicalness, its emphasis on deficits, conceals from us the actual life which is instinct in all cerebral functions, at least higher functions than such as those of imagination, memory, and perception. It conceals from us the very life of the mind. It is with these living and often highly personal dispositions of brain and mind, especially in a state of enhanced and thus illuminated activity, that we shall be concerned now. Enhancement allows the possibilities not only of a healthy fullness and exuberance, but of a rather ominous extravagance, aberration, monstrosity, the sort of too muchness which continually loomed in awakenings as patients, overexcited, tended to disintegration and uncontrol, an overpowering by impulse, image, and will, a possession or dispossession by a physiology gone wild. This danger is built into the very nature of growth and life. Growth can become overgrowth, life, hyperlife. Hi, Brian. Hello, neurodivergent. All the hyper states can become monstrous, perverse aberrations, and para states. Hyperkinesia tends towards parakinesia, abnormal movements, chorea, and tics. Hypernosia readily becomes paranosia, perversions, apparitions, and the morbidly heightened senses. The ardors of hyperstates can become violent passions. Turn loose! Hi, Johnny. The paradox of an illness, which can present as wellness, as a wonderful feeling of health and well-being, and only later reveal its malignant potentials, is one of the chimeras, tricks, and ironies of nature. It is one which has fascinated a number of artists, especially those who equate art with sickness. Thus it is a theme. At one Dionysiac, Venerian, and Faustian, or at once Dionysiac, Venerian, and Faustian, which persistently recurs in Thomas Mann. From the febrile tuberculous highs of the Magic Mountain to the spirokettle inspirations of Dr. Faustus and the aphrodisiac malignancy in his last tale, The Black Swan. I've always been intrigued by such ironies and have written of them before. In Migraine, I spoke of the high which may precede or constitute the start of attacks. Interesting. And quoted George Eliot's remark that feeling dangerously well was often for her the sign or harbinger of an attack. Dangerously well. What an irony is this? It expresses precisely the doubleness, the paradox of feeling too well. That's interesting. I've noticed that before. Not necessarily with migraines, but I can tell when I'm really in for a down dip because I get almost manically high. So that's interesting. For wellness, naturally, is no cause for complaint. People relish it. They enjoy it. They are at the furthest pole from complaint. People complain of feeling ill, of not well, unless, as George Eliot does, they have some intimation of wrongness or danger, either through knowledge or association, or the very excess of excess. Thus, though a patient will scarcely complain of being very well, they may become suspicious if they feel too well. Okay, hang on just 1 second. I've left the heater cranked, I think, or else it got stuck on again because I'm dying and apparently my PC isn't liking it either. So BRB. There we go. Yeah, it had to have gotten stuck on because I had to turn it higher to get it to turn itself off. So, whew. I was wondering why it was getting so toasty in here. Where am I? There I am. Okay, back again. Whew. Brian's talking about the auction on Johnny's stream tomorrow. That's going to be fun. We're going, well, I'm going to be in the chat there as usual, but we're auctioning off the name to the live from whatever studios that will be going up on Johnny's screen on his wallpaper, like as he streams. You'll see it down below. Very cool. The last one was live from the Pool Scam Sam studios. Pool Scam Sam is one of the guys in the chat. He's a really good guy. So it'll be interesting to see what kind of hijinks and shenanigans we get up to in chat tomorrow, trying to figure out a name that is YouTube okay, but still very, very fun. I think we really need something from the Sofa King. I think since you sell futons, Johnny, you know, why not bring the king of sofas out there with us, right? Brian says we need a sub increase so large that Digger and I can get monetized. Heck yeah, I'll take it. The sub increase for sure. It's nice to see you guys in chat. Holy Hannah, the chat was, both chat boxes were empty, and I'm like, okay, is something wrong? Is it just my side is not feeding, or is no one talking? I really wasn't sure if I was going. It says that I'm live, but you know, so I'm glad you guys spoke up for a minute so I can see you do not sell sofas. But you sell futons. Why wouldn't you sell sofas as well? That's all I'm asking. It's like the gorilla milk, and then you also sell the gorilla glue so that you can make use of the gorilla through all states of its productive use. So why not sell sofas too? Maybe we can even get you, you know, selling armchairs or lazy boys. Haha. Like, don't limit yourself just to the futons, man. You got to think larger. And Brian's alone in the lab and hell is breaking loose. Uh-oh. Damn it, Brian. You're not supposed to listen to these streams. I cannot be held responsible for any emergencies or accidents that happen in Brian's lab while I read. And they are not vicious lies. They are just suggestions on more ways to make money. That's all they are, Johnny. Oh, my goodness. Where am I here? Oh, it's, yeah. It's already, I can feel that it's not pumping heat out anymore. All right. This was a central and, so to speak, a cruel theme in Awakenings, that patients profoundly ill and the profoundest deficits for many decades might find themselves, as by a miracle, suddenly well, only to move from there into the hazards, the tribulations of excess, functions stimulated far beyond allowable limits. Some patients realized this and had premonitions, but some did not. Thus, Rose R., in the first flush and joy of restored health, said, "It's fabulous. It's gorgeous." But as things accelerated towards uncontrol, she said, things can't last. Something awful is coming. And similarly, with more or less insight in most of the others, as with Leonard L., as he passed from repletion to excess. As I wrote in Awakenings, his abundance of health and energy, of grace as he called it, became too abundant and started to assume an extravagant form. His sense of harmony and ease and effortless control was replaced by a sense of too muchness, a great surplus, a great pressure of every kind, which threatened to disintegrate him, to burst him asunder. This is the simultaneous gift and affliction, the delight, the anguish conferred by excess. And it is felt by insightful patients as questionable and paradoxical. I have too much energy, one Tourette's patient said. Everything is too bright, too powerful, too much. It's a feverish energy, a morbid brilliance. Dangerous wellness, morbid brilliance, a deceptive euphoria with the abscesses beneath, or with the abysses beneath. This is the trap promised and threatened by excess, whether it be set by nature in the form of some intoxicating disorder, or by ourselves in some form of excitant addiction. Thank you, Neurodivergent One. Here's a little color for the walls. This card is just about empty, but thanks for being on Rumble. I thank you so much. I really appreciate it. I tend to have more people in Rumble in my afternoon streams, but I really appreciate that you're over there. Thank you. The human dilemmas in such situations are of an extraordinary kind, for patients are here faced with disease as seduction, something remote from and far more equivocal than the traditional theme of illness as suffering or affliction. And nobody, absolutely nobody, is exempt from such bizarreness, such indignities. In disorders of excess, there may be a sort of collusion in which the self is more and more aligned and identified with its sickness, so that finally it seems to lose all independent existence and be nothing but a product of sickness. This fear is expressed by witty Tichy Ray when he says, I consist of ticks and there is nothing else. Or when he envisages when he imagines a mind growth, a teratoma, which might engulf him. For him, with his strong ego and relatively mild Tourette's syndrome, there was not in reality any such danger. But for patients with weak or undeveloped egos, coupled with overwhelmingly strong disease, there is a very real risk of such possession or dispossession. I do no more than touch on this in The Possessed. Well, that's interesting because from my understanding of fibro, that's kind of what I am. I've got an excess. Everything feels so much more. It's like if everyone starts at a 0 for pain, I'm starting at a 5 or a 6. And then it gets higher from there. It's very weird. Like if I just if I stub my toe, it hurts so much more than when one of you guys would stub a toe, allegedly. That's how it's been explained to me by some of the specialists. But it's like my pain receptors are on permanent high to start, and then they just go higher. So yeah, just bumping my shoulder or my elbow rather, not a big deal. But if I hit my funny bone in there, I actually on purpose. But I feel it much more than the average person. Everything is intensified, or at least that's how it's been explained to me. So okay, I think it's actually Witty Ticky. It's just spelled Ticcy. So considering he has Tourette's, I'm thinking it's probably Witty Ticky Ray. And this is chapter 10, titled Witty Ticky Ray. In 1885, Gilles de la Tourette, a pupil of Charcot, described the astonishing syndrome which now bears his name. Tourette's syndrome, as it was immediately dubbed, is characterized by an excess of nervous energy and a great production and extravagance of strange motions and notions. Tics, jerks, mannerisms, grimaces, noises, curses, involuntary imitations, and compulsions of all sorts, with an odd elfin humor and a tendency to antic and outlandish kinds of play. In its highest forms, Tourette's syndrome involves every aspect of the affective, the instinctual, and the imaginative life. In its lower and perhaps commoner forms, there may be little more than abnormal movements and impulsivity, though even here there is an element of strangeness. It was well recognized and extensively reported in the closing years of the last century, for these were years of spacious neurology which did not hesitate to conjoin the organic and the psychic. It was clear to Tourette and his peers that this syndrome was a sort of a possession by primitive impulses and urges, but also that it was a possession with an organic basis, a very definite, if undiscovered, neurological disorder. In the years that immediately followed the publication of Tourette's original papers, many hundreds of cases of this syndrome were described, no two cases ever being quite the same. It became clear that there were forms which were mild and benign, and others of quite terrible grotesqueness and violence. Equally, it was clear that some people could take Tourette's and accommodate it within a commodious personality, even gaining advantage from the swiftness of thought and association and invention which went with it, while others might indeed be possessed and scarcely able to achieve real identity amid the tremendous pressure and chaos of Tourettic impulses. There was always, as Luria remarked of his mnemonist, a fight between an it and an I. Charcot and his pupils, which included Freud and Babinski as well as Tourette, were among the last of their profession with a combined vision of body and soul, it and I, neurology and psychiatry. By the turn of the century, a split had occurred into a soulless neurology and a bodiless psychology, and with this, any understanding of Tourette's disappeared. In fact, Tourette's syndrome itself seemed to have disappeared and was scarcely at all reported in the first half of this century. Some physicians, indeed, regarded it as mythical, a product of Tourette's colorful imagination. Most had never heard of it. It was as forgotten as the great sleepy sickness epidemic of the 1920s. The forgetting of sleepy sickness, encephalitis lethargica, and the forgetting of Tourette's have much in common. Both disorders were extraordinary and strange beyond belief, at least the beliefs of a contracted medicine. They could not be accommodated in the conventional frameworks of medicine, and therefore they were forgotten and mysteriously disappeared. But there is a much more intimate connection, which was hinted at in the 1920s, in the hyperkinetic or frenzied forms which the sleepy sickness sometimes took. These patients tended, at the beginnings of their illness, to show a mounting excitement of mind and body, violent movements, tics, compulsions of all kinds. Some time afterwards, they were overtaken by an opposite fate, an all-enveloping, trance-like sleep, in which I found them 40 years later. And your power just went out. Oh, crap. Oh, that really sucks. Um, I wish there was something I could do for you because that really sucks. Deep breath and just wait it out. That's all you can do. Shit. Oh, Mal. Hello, my boo. Come here then. Here you are. Hello, my boo. She needs some attention, eh? In 1969, I gave these sleepy sickness or post-encephalitic patients L-DOPA, a precursor of the transmitter dopamine, which was greatly lowered in their brains. They were transformed by it. First, they were awakened from stupor to health. Then they were driven towards the other pole, of tics and frenzy. This was my first experience of Tourette-like syndromes. Wild excitements, violent impulses, often combined with a weird antic humor. I started to speak of Touretteism, although I had never seen a patient with Tourette's. Early in 1971, the Washington Post, which had taken an interest in the awakenings of my post-encephalitic patients, asked me how they were getting on. I replied, "They're ticking." They're ticking. I replied, "They're ticking," which prompted them to publish an article on ticks. After the publication of this article, I received countless letters, the majority of which I passed on to my colleagues. But there was one patient I did consent to see, Ray. The day after I saw Ray, it seemed to me that I noticed 3 Touretters in the street in downtown New York. I was confounded, for Tourette syndrome was said to be excessively rare. It had an incident, I had to read, of 1 of the million. Yet I had apparently seen 3 examples in an hour. I was thrown into a turmoil of bewilderment and wonder. Was it possible that I had been overlooking this all the time, either not seeing such patients or vaguely dismissing them as nervous, cracked, twitchy? Was it possible that everyone had been overlooking them? Was it possible that Tourette's was not a rarity, but rather common, 1,000 times more common, say, than previously supposed? The next day, without specially looking, I saw another 2 in the street. At this point, I conceived a whimsical fantasy or private joke. Suppose, I said to myself, that Tourette's is very common, yet fails to be recognized, but once recognized is easily and constantly seen. Suppose one such Touretter recognizes another, and these 2 a third, and these 3 a fourth, until, by incrementing recognition, a whole band of them is found, brothers and sisters in pathology, a new species in our midst, joined together by mutual recognition and concern. Could there not come together by such spontaneous aggregation a whole association of New Yorkers with Tourette's? 3 years later, in 1974, I found that my fantasy had become a reality, that there had indeed come into being a Tourette Syndrome Association. It had 50 members then. Now, 7 years later, it has a few thousand. Wow. Johnny, yep, won't have the power back in time for the show. Unless they get done sooner than predicted. Oh, damn it, Johnny, I'm sorry. That's really shitty. Damn, I wish there was something I could do, bud. Kind of BS. Someone had hit a power line. That's what I'm wondering. If you guys just had snow, maybe someone had a slippy slide into a pole or something. Well, so much for starting earlier, hey? At least today. It had 50 members then. Now, 7 years later, it had a few thousand. This astounding increase must be ascribed to the efforts of the TSA itself, even though it consists only of patients, their relatives, and physicians. The association has been endlessly resourceful in its attempts to make known, or in the best sense, publicize this Tourette's plight. It has aroused responsible interest and concern in place of the repugnance or dismissal which had so often been the Tourette's lot. And it has encouraged research of all kinds, from the physiological to the sociological, research into the biochemistry of the Tourettic brain, on genetic and other factors which may co-determine Tourette's, on the abnormally rapid and indiscriminate associations and reactions which characterize it, instinctual and behavioral structures of a developmentally and even physiogenetically primitive kind to have been revealed. Now it has a little insert here. A very similar situation happened with muscular dystrophy, which was never seen until Duchenne described it in the 1850s. By 1860, after his original description, many hundreds of cases had been recognized and described, so much so that Charcot said, how come that a disease so common, so widespread, and so recognizable at a glance, a disease which has doubtless always existed, how come that it is only recognized now? Why did we need Monsieur Duchenne to open our eyes? Good point. Brian says we had pure ice. I'm so happy that I finally got a garage. Yeah, would have had a centimeter of ice on my car this morning. Yeah, I've only ever seen pictures. It's never gotten so cold and yet rained so that you get, like, instead of snow, you get ice. An ice rain, I think they call it. I've seen pictures. It's beautiful, but we don't get them here. Okay, well, I guess she's done with me. Johnny says, not sure, but the whole house is out and it's going to be an hour and a half to fix. So if they get done early and I don't have to build everything again. Okay. Everything's saved and shut down, but you don't know. All right, well, good luck to you. Yeah, that really sucks. I could crack wise at the moment, but I won't. And yeah, I mean, when all else fails, Johnny, just turn it loose. Okay? Just turn it loose. Turn it loose. You'll figure it out. All right. There's been research on the body language and grammar and linguistic structure of tics. There has been unexpected insights into the nature of cursing and joking, which are also characteristic of some other neurological disorders. And not least, there have been studies of the interaction of Tourette's with their family and others, and of the strange mishaps which may attend these relationships. The TSA's remarkably successful endeavors are an integral part of the history of Tourette's, and as such, unprecedented. Linda's asking, Digger, have you ever seen Bohemian Rhapsody? I have not seen Bohemian Rhapsody. I am writing that down right now. That sounds right up my alley. Sorry, okay. Thank you. I will check that out. All right. So the TSA's remarkably successful endeavors are an integral part of the history of Tourette's, and as such, unprecedented. Never before have patients led the way to understanding become the active and enterprising agents of their own comprehension and cure. What has emerged in these last 10 years, largely under the aegis and stimulus of the TSA, is a clear confirmation that Gilles de la Tourette, that Tourette's intuition, blah, blah, little water. You got to turn it loose, Ryan. Just turn it loose. Not what? It. Turn it loose. Hallelujah. Turn it loose. All right, let's try that again. It's a clear confirmation that Tourette's intuition that this syndrome indeed had an organic neurological basis. The it in Tourette's, like the it in Parkinsonism and chorea, reflects what Pavlov called the blind force of the subcortex, a disturbance of those primitive parts of the brain which govern go and drive. In Parkinson's, which affects motion but not action as such, the disturbance lies in the midbrain and its connections. In chorea, not Korea the place, Chorea, which is a chaos of fragmentary quasi-actions, the disorder lies in higher levels of the basal ganglia. In Tourette's, where there is excitement of the emotions and the passions, a disorder of the primal, instinctual basis of behavior, the disturbance seems to lie in the very highest parts of the old brain, the thalamus, hypothalamus, limbic system, and amygdala, where the basic affective and instinctual determinants of personality are lodged. Thus, Tourette's, pathologically no less than clinically, constitutes a sort of missing link between body and mind, and lies, so to speak, between chorea and mania. What is it? I'm a whore. You have to find out what it is for yourself, Brian. But you got to turn it loose. Turn it loose. Yeah. As in the rare hyperkinetic forms of encephalitis lethargica, and in all post-encephalitic patients overexcited by L-DOPA, patients with Tourette syndrome or Touretteism from any other cause, strokes, cerebral tumors, intoxications, or infections, seem to have an excess of exciter transmitters in the brain, especially the transmitter dopamine. And as lethargic Parkinson's patients need more dopamine to arouse them, as my post-encephalitic patients were awakened by the dopamine precursor L-DOPA, so frenetic and Tourettic patients must have their dopamine lowered by a dopamine antagonist, such as the drug haloperidol. Oh, I know that one. Hello, AP. How you doing? Hyperactivity of three centers of the brain. Exactly. On the other hand, there is not just a surfeit of dopamine in the Tourette's brain, as there is not just a deficiency of it in the Parkinson's brain. There are also much subtler and more widespread changes, as one would expect in a disorder which may alter personality. There are countless subtle paths of abnormality which differ from patient to patient and from day to day in any one patient. Haldol can be an answer to Tourette's, but neither it nor any other drug can be the answer, any more than L-DOPA is the answer to Parkinson's. Complementary to any purely medicinal or medical approach, there must also be an existential approach, in particular, a sensitive understanding of action, art, and play as being in essence healthy and free, and thus antagonistic to crude drives and impulsions, to the blind force of the subcortex from which these patients suffer. The motionless Parkinson's can sing and dance, and when he does so is completely free from his Parkinsonism. And when the galvanized Touretteer sings, plays, or acts, he in turn is completely liberated from his Tourette's. Here, the I vanquishes and reigns over the it. Between 1973 and his death in 1977, I enjoyed the privilege of corresponding with the great neuropsychologist A.R. Luria, and often sent him observations and tapes on Tourette's. In one of his last letters, he wrote to me, "This is truly of tremendous importance. Any understanding of such a syndrome must vastly broaden our understanding of human nature in general. I know of no other syndrome of comparable interest." When I first saw Ray, he was 24 years old and almost incapacitated by multiple tics of extreme violence coming in volleys every few seconds. He had been subject to these since the age of 4 and severely stigmatized by the attention they aroused, though his high intelligence, his wit, his strength of character, and sense of reality enabled him to pass successfully through school and college, and to be valued and loved by the few friends and his wife. Since leaving college, however, he had been fired from a dozen jobs, always because of tics, never for incompetence. Was continually in crisis of one sort or another, usually caused by his impatience, his pugnacity, and his coarse, brilliant chutzpah. And he had found his marriage threatened by involuntary cries of fuck. Of fuck, shit, and so on, which would burst from him at times of sexual excitement. He was, like many Touretters, remarkably musical and could scarcely have survived, emotionally or economically, had he not been a weekend jazz drummer of real virtuosity, famous for his sudden and wild extemporization, which would arise from the tick of a compulsive hitting of a drum, and would instantly be made the nucleus of a wild and wonderful improvisation, so that the sudden intruder would be turned to brilliant advantage. His Tourette's was also of advantage in various games, especially ping-pong, at which he excelled, partly in consequence of his abnormal quickness of reflex and reaction, but especially, again, because of the improvisations. Very sudden, nervous, frivolous shots, in his own words, which were so unexpected and startling as to be virtually unanswerable. The only time he was free from tics was in post-coital quiescence or in sleep, or when he swam or sang or worked, evenly and rhythmically, and found a kinetic melody, a play which was tension-free, tic-free, and free. Under an ebullient, eruptive, clownish surface, he was a deeply serious man, and a man in despair. He had never heard of the TSA, which indeed scarcely existed at the time, nor had he heard of Haldol. He had diagnosed himself as having Tourette's after reading the article on tics in the Washington Post. When I confirmed the diagnosis and spoke of using Haldol, he was excited but cautious. I made a test of Haldol by injection, and he proved extraordinarily sensitive to it, becoming virtually tic-free for a period of 2 hours after I administered no more than 1/8 of a milligram. After this auspicious trial, I started him on Haldol, prescribing a dose of 1/4 of a milligram 3 times a day. He came back the following week with a black eye and a broken nose. And said, "So much for your fucking Haldol." Even this minute dose, he said, had thrown him off balance, interfered with his speed, his timing, his preternaturally quick reflexes. Like many Touretters, he was attracted to spinning things, and to revolving doors in particular, which he would dodge in and out of like lightning. But he had lost this knack on the Haldol, had mistimed his movements, and had been bashed on the nose. Further, many of his tics, far from disappearing, had simply become slow and enormously extended. He might get transfixed in mid-tic, as he put it, and find himself in an almost catatonic posture. Ferenczi once called catatonia the opposite of tics, and suggested that these called cataclonia. He presented a picture, even on this minute dose, of marked Parkinsonism, dystonia, cataconia, and psychomotor block, a reaction which seemed inauspicious in the extreme, suggesting not insensitivity, but such oversensitivity, such pathological sensitivity, that perhaps he could only be thrown from one extreme to another, from acceleration and Touretteism to cataconia and Parkinsonism, with no possibility of any happy medium. He was understandably discouraged by this experience and this thought, and also by another thought which he now expressed. Suppose you could take away the tics, he said. What would be left? I consist of tics. There is nothing else. He seemed, at least jokingly, to have a little sense of his identity except as a ticker. He called himself the ticker of President's Broadway, and spoke of himself in the third person as witty Ticky Ray, adding that he was so prone to ticky witticisms and witty tickicisms that he barely knew whether it was a gift or a curse. He said he could not imagine life without Tourette's, nor was he sure he would care for it. I will not say that abbreviation in its fullness, but WWRBBMs for sure. Brian, not quite the same. Not quite the same, but we'll fill you in at some point. Oh, Johnny's going to fill you in right now. He says he would turn it loose. Turn it loose. You got to turn it loose. See, you got it now. You get it. You get it, Brian. You get it. Turn it loose. He was understandably discouraged by this experience and this thought. Oh, I already did that. Sorry. I was strongly reminded at this point of what I had encountered in some of my post-encephalitic patients who were inordinately sensitive to L-DOPA. I had nevertheless observed in their case that such extreme physiological sensitivities and instabilities might be transcended if it were possible for the patient to lead a rich and full life, that the existential balance or poise of such a life may overcome the severe physiological imbalance. Feeling that Ray also had such possibilities in him, that despite his own words, he was not incorrigibly centered on his own disease in an exhibitionistic or narcissistic way, I suggested that we meet weekly for a period of 3 months. During this time, we would try to imagine life without Tourette's. We would explore, if only in thought and feeling, how much life could offer him without the perverse attractions and attentions of Tourette's. We would examine the role and economic importance of Tourette's to him, and how he might get on without these. We would explore all these for 3 months, and then make another trial of Haldol. There followed 3 months of deep and patient exploration in which, often against much resistance and spite and lack of faith in self and life, all sorts of healthy and human potentials came to light. Potentials which had somehow survived 20 years of severe Tourette's and Tourette life, hidden in the deepest and strongest core of the personality. This deep exploration was exciting and encouraging in itself and gave us at least a limited hope. What in fact happened exceeded all our expectations and showed itself to be no mere flash in the pan, but an enduring and permanent transformation of reactivity. For when I again tried Ray on Haldol, in the same minute dose as before, he now found himself tick-free, but without significant ill effects, and he has remained this way for the past 9 years. The effects of Haldol here were miraculous, but only became so when the miracle was allowed. Its initial effects were close to catastrophic, partly no doubt on a physiological basis, but also because any cure or relinquishing of Tourette's at this time would have been premature and economically impossible. Having had Tourette's since the age of 4, Ray had no experience of any normal life. He was heavily dependent on his exotic disease, and not unnaturally employed and exploited it in various ways. He had not been ready to give up his Tourette's, and, I cannot help thinking, might never have been ready without those 3 months of intense preparation, of tremendously hard and concentrated deep analysis and thought. The past 9 years, on the whole, have been happy ones for Ray, a liberation beyond any possible expectation. After 20 years of being confined by Tourette's and compelled to this and that by its crude physiology, he enjoys a spaciousness and freedom he would never have thought possible, or at most, during our analysis, only theoretically impossible. His marriage is tender and stable, and he is now a father as well. He has many good friends who love and value him as a person and not simply as an accomplished Tourettic clown. He plays an important part in his local community, and he holds a responsible position at work. Yet problems remain, problems perhaps inseparable from having Tourette's and Haldol. During his working hours and working week, Ray remains sober, solid, square on Haldol. This is how he describes his Haldol self. He is slow and deliberate in his movements and judgments, with none of the impatience or impetuosity he showed before Haldol, but equally none of the wild improvisations and inspirations. Even his dreams are different in quality. Straight wish fulfillment, he says, with none of the elaborations, the extravaganzas of Tourette's. He is less sharp, less quick in repartee, no longer bubbling with witty tics or ticky wit. He no longer enjoys or excels at ping pong or other games. He no longer feels that urgent killer instinct, that instinct to win, to beat the other man. He is less competitive then, and also less playful. He has lost the impulse or the knack of sudden frivolous moves which take everyone by surprise. He has lost his obscenities, his coarse chutzpah, and his funk. He has come to feel increasingly that something is missing. Most important and disabling, because this was vital for him as a means of both support and self-expression. He found that on Haldol he was musically dull, average, competent, but lacking energy, enthusiasm, extravagance, and joy. He no longer had tics or compulsive hitting of the drums, but he no longer had wild and creative surges. As this pattern became clear to him, and after discussing it with me, Ray made a momentous decision. He would take Haldol dutifully throughout the working week, but would take himself off it and let fly at the weekends. This he had done for the past 3 years, so now there were 2 Rays, on and off of Haldol. There is the sober citizen with the calm deliberator from Monday to Friday, and there is witty ticky Ray, frivolous, frenetic, inspired at the weekends. It is a strange situation, as Ray is first to admit. Having Tourette's, he says, is wild, like being drunk all the time. Being on Haldol is dull, makes one square and sober, and neither state is really free. You normals who have the right transmitters in the right places at the right times in your brains have all feelings, all styles, available all the time. Gravity, levity, whatever is appropriate. We Touretters don't. We are forced into levity by our Tourettes and forced into gravity when we take Haldol. You are free. You have natural balance. We must make the best of an artificial balance. Ray does make the best of it and has a full life despite Tourette's, despite Haldol, and despite the unfreedom and the artifice, despite being deprived of that birthright of natural freedom which most of us enjoy. But he has been taught by his sickness, and in a way he has transcended it. He would say, with Nietzsche, I have traversed many kinds of health and keep traversing them. And as for sickness, are we not almost tempted to ask whether we could get along without it? Only great pain is the ultimate liberator of the spirit. Paradoxically, Ray, deprived of natural animal physiological health, has found a new health and new freedom through the vicissitudes he is subject to. He has achieved what Nietzsche liked to call the great health, rare humor, valor, and resilience of spirit, despite being, or because he is, afflicted with Tourette's. Well, that's an hour and a half in. What do you guys and gals say? That was pretty good. It's interesting to see the perspective from the perspective of someone with Tourette's. And I like the analogy that it's like the opposite side of the coin to Parkinson's. I can understand that. Nero, I think you're the only one in the Rumble chat today. But I see you and I appreciate you. Thank you so much for being here. Brian, Johnny, did you see the post from the Blizzard artist called for the Control-Alt-Delete of MAGA voters? Ooh. Well, that sounds like fun. I did not see it, but I'm willing to go looking for that. Interesting. Well, I think I'm going to stop here. It said there were 11 in here a minute ago, lol. Yeah, I don't know. The numbers are all weird. I don't really rely on any of them. I just hope someone writes in chat so I can see that there's someone listening. But yeah, I think I'm going to call it here. It's been an hour and a half. And I think that Tourette's one is one I want to stop on and think about. Because it's interesting. I like the, yes, lurkers. I'm a lurker quite often these days. At least in LawTube, I lurk. But anyways, that was for today. So we've started part 2, which is excesses. Next week, we will do chapter 11, which is Cupid's disease. Actually, that'll fit rather well if it's Cupid's disease, because Valentine's Day is coming up really quickly, right? A couple of weeks, something like that. So we'll leave it there. Hopefully, Johnny, they get your power back on sooner rather than later. Brian, I hope that none of the emergencies are too much of an emergency, considering you're in the lab by yourself. Thank you, Linda, for speaking up so that I could know that there were actually people there. I appreciate you very much. And yes, Johnny, turn it loose. That's all we got to do is just turn it loose. All will be well if we just turn it loose. So on that note, you guys have, guys and gals, have a wonderful rest of your day. I will see you next. It's Thursday today. So I will see you Saturday night for game night on Shenny's station or channel or whatever it is. All right. Channel. That's what it is. I'll see you on Saturday. Neurodivergent one. The next stream will be Saturday at 6 p.m. Pacific time. It'll be on Shenny's channel. Oh shoot, it's in private browsing. I think it's Shennygram Yellrock still on YouTube. Oh yeah. I tried to do something, look it up. Shennygram Yellrock still. If you go and look at any of my previous Saturday night game night streams, there will be a link to her previous streams, which will get you to her channel. Apparently my PC doesn't like me looking for stuff though. So that's where I'll be Saturday, 6 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. Sunday, same place. Yeah, Eastern Standard is the only real time. Not true at all. I like Pacific. I get to find out all the crap that's gone on before we get there. So we got a chance to prepare. But until game night, I'll see you. I'll be here on Monday on my channel for another chatting with friends. And until then, have a wonderful time, you guys. Be well.
She's a curious conduct, always digging for the truth, searching in the night, look for all that proof. With a shovel